The coffee machine shuddered its last breath at exactly 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and that's when everything started to unravel. I was standing there in the break room, watching brown liquid sputter into my mug like the machine was having some kind of mechanical seizure, when I heard her voice behind me. "Oh baby, that thing's been dying for weeks." The words hung in the air. Then silence. The kind of silence that has weight and texture, that presses against your eardrums and makes you hyper-aware of every small sound, the hum of the refrigerator, someone's heel clicking down the hallway, the blood rushing in your own head. Turned slowly. Rachel Park stood in the doorway, her hand still raised like she'd been about to gesture at the coffee machine, her face draining of color in real time. Behind her, 3 associates from the litigation department had frozen mid-conversation, their eyes wide, mouths slightly open. And behind them, I could see shadows of people stopping in the hallway, necks craning. She'd called me baby. My boss. The managing partner of Park and Associates. The woman who'd interviewed me 4 years ago with such professional detachment, I'd thought she might be a particularly advanced robot. That Rachel Park. I meant, she started, then stopped. Her hand dropped. The machine. I meant the machine is, but we both knew what she'd said, and how she'd said it. There'd been nothing mechanical about that baby. It had been soft. Familiar. The kind of word you use when you're not thinking, when you're so comfortable with someone that endearments slip out like breathing. I watched her realize this in real time, watched her lawyer brain catch up with her mouth, watched her calculate exactly how bad this was going to be. Right, I said, rescuing us both. The machine. It's definitely on its last legs. I grabbed my half-full mug and walked past her, past the staring associates, past the people in the hallway who were suddenly very interested in their phones. My office was only 30 feet away, but it felt like miles. I could feel their eyes on my back, could practically hear the group chats exploding into life. I made it to my desk and closed the door. Set down the coffee. Stared at my computer screen without seeing it. My reflection looked back at me from the black monitor, 32 years old, brown hair pulled into a bun so tight my scalp hurt, wearing the same gray suit I'd bought when I'd made senior associate last year. Professional. Untouchable. Certainly not someone who got called baby by their boss in front of half the office. My phone buzzed. A text from Jamie, one of the junior associates. What was that? Then another from Marcus in accounting. Did she just? I turned my phone face down and pressed my palms against my eyes. The thing is, Rachel Park and I had history. The kind of history that's supposed to stay buried under years and professionalism and the careful architecture of a working relationship. We'd met 7 years ago, before Park and Associates existed, before I'd even finished law school. I'd been waiting tables at a wine bar in the West Village, and she'd been there for a friend's birthday party, recently divorced and trying to remember how to be a person instead of just a lawyer. She'd stayed after her friends left. We'd talked until closing. She'd waited while I finished my side work, walked me to the subway, kissed me on the platform while a train screamed past. For 6 months, we'd been something. What exactly, I'd never been sure. She'd been careful not to define it, and I'd been too young and too infatuated to push. Then she'd gotten the opportunity to start her own firm, and I'd been accepted to Columbia Law, and we'd agreed, mutually theoretically, that it was better to end things before they got complicated. We'll stay friends, she'd said. Like that was possible. Like you could kiss someone the way she'd kissed me and then just wave politely when you passed them on the street. We hadn't spoken for 3 years. Then I'd graduated and started applying to firms, and hers had been on the list because it was good, because I was qualified, because I'd thought 3 years was enough time to build walls between past and present. When I'd walked into that interview and seen her face, older, sharper, more beautiful somehow, I'd nearly turned around and left. But I'd needed the job, and she'd needed associates, and we'd both been so determinedly professional that we'd convinced ourselves it could work. And it had worked. For 4 years, it had worked. We'd been the picture of professional propriety. She was my boss. I was her senior associate. We worked late hours on complicated cases and kept everything scrupulously correct. If I sometimes caught her looking at me with something in her eyes that wasn't quite professional distance, I ignored it. If I sometimes went home and thought about her hands and her voice and the way she'd once said my name in the dark, I didn't let it show. But now she'd called me baby in front of the entire office, and all those careful walls were cracking. My phone kept buzzing. I kept ignoring it. At 10:15, there was a knock on my door. Come in, I said, not looking up from my computer, where I'd been staring at the same brief for 20 minutes without reading a single word. The door opened. Closed. I looked up. Rachel stood with her back against the door, still pale, her dark hair falling out of its usual perfect twist. She was 41 now, with lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when we'd met, with a confidence she'd earned through building something from nothing. She looked exhausted. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we?" I kept my voice level. Professional. It was clearly a mistake. People make mistakes. "Alex, the coffee machine's broken. You were thinking about getting it fixed." The word just slipped out. These things happen. She crossed the room and sat in the chair across from my desk, uninvited, and that was so unlike her, unlike the Rachel who'd spent 4 years maintaining perfect professional distance, that I finally stopped pretending to look at my computer. "I haven't called anyone baby in 7 years," she said quietly. "Not since, Not since you." The words landed between us like stones in still water, rippling outward, disturbing everything. "Rachel." I closed my laptop. "What are you doing?" "I don't know." She laughed, but it sounded broken. "I was thinking about that machine, about how it's been broken for weeks and I keep meaning to replace it, and you were standing there looking annoyed, and you were making that face you make when something's not working the way it should, and She stopped. Breathed. It just came out. It can't just come out. I kept my voice low, aware that sound carried in this building, that people were probably already pressed against doors trying to hear. We have an entire office full of people who are currently losing their minds trying to figure out what that was. We have professional reputations. I know what we have. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and I remembered her in this position 7 years ago, sitting on the edge of my bed in my tiny apartment, telling me she was sorry but she had to focus on her career. "I built this firm from nothing. I know exactly what's at stake." "Then why did you?" "Because I'm tired." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of acting like you're just another associate when I think about you constantly. I'm tired of watching you date other people and acting like it doesn't kill me. I'm tired of lying." The silence that followed was different from the one in the break room. This one was full of everything we'd spent 4 years not saying. "You ended it," I said finally. "You said we couldn't be together and run a professional firm." "I know." "You said it was better this way." "I know." "You made me believe it was over." "It was never over." She looked at me, and her eyes were wet. "Not for me. Not for a single day." I stood up, needing distance, needing air. Walked to the window that overlooked the street 40 floors below. People down there looked like ants, scurrying with purpose, living lives that made sense. "For years," I said to the glass. 4 years of you acting like I'm nothing more than an employee. 4 years of professional distance and formal emails and pretending we don't have history. And now you want to tell me you've been thinking about me this whole time." "I'm not." She stood too. I could see her reflection in the window, standing behind me, not quite close enough to touch. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. After this morning, after everyone heard, I couldn't keep pretending that it didn't mean anything. It can't mean anything." I turned to face her. "You were right 4 years ago. We can't do this and work together. We can't do this and run a firm. We can't. What if I don't care anymore?" The question stopped me cold. What if I don't care about professional distance or what people think or whether it's complicated? She took a step closer. What if I've spent 4 years being professional and miserable, and I'm done being miserable? "Rachel, I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I'm not asking you to forgive me for ending things before, or for hiring you when I shouldn't have, or for calling you baby in front of the entire office." She smiled, sad and small. "I'm just asking you to know the truth. That every day for 4 years, I've wanted to call you that. Every single day." My phone buzzed again on my desk. The sound of the outside world, of the office that was probably currently imploding with gossip, of reality pressing in. "This is going to be a nightmare," I said. "Probably. HR is going to have opinions. Definitely. Everyone is going to talk. They're already talking." I looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman who'd walked away 7 years ago because she'd been smart enough to know we couldn't build something real when she was still healing from divorce and I was still figuring out who I was. At the woman who'd hired me anyway, who'd spent 4 years teaching me to be a better lawyer while pretending she felt nothing. At the woman who was looking at me now like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. I went on 17 dates in the last 4 years, I said. Did you know that? She nodded slowly. 18. The one with the surgeon, you forgot. You left early to work on the Henderson brief. You were counting. I told you. I think about you constantly. I couldn't make any of them work, I continued. 17 perfectly nice women, and I couldn't make it past a third date with any of them. I told myself it was because I was busy, because the work was demanding, because I was focused on my career. I paused. But it was because they weren't you. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were bright with tears. So what do we do? She asked. I don't know. I laughed, shaky and uncertain. This is insane. This is completely unprofessional. Maybe we could start with coffee, she said. Real coffee, from somewhere with a working machine. Away from the office. Away from all of this. Like a date. Like a date. My phone buzzed again. The world was waiting. The office was probably descending into chaos. There would be conversations to have, damage control to manage, professional boundaries to establish or destroy. But right now, in this moment, there was just Rachel looking at me like she'd been waiting 4 years for permission to look at me this way. Okay, I said. Okay. Coffee. Tonight. But we're going to have to deal with the fallout from this morning first. She smiled, and it was the real smile, the one I remembered from 7 years ago, the one that had made me fall in love with her in the first place. Together? She asked. Together. The afternoon was exactly as terrible as I'd anticipated. By lunch, the entire office knew something had happened, even if they didn't know exactly what. The associates whispered in corners. The partners gave us curious looks. Jamie cornered me in the bathroom to ask if I was okay, which I appreciated even though I had no idea how to answer. Rachel called a firm-wide meeting at 2 p.m. She stood at the front of the conference room, and I sat in my usual seat, and everyone else arranged themselves with the careful casualness of people, trying not to look like they were desperately curious. I want to address this morning, Rachel said, direct as always. I used inappropriate language with a colleague, and I apologize for any confusion or discomfort that caused. It won't happen again. The lie was smooth and professional. I watched people process it, watched them decide whether to believe it or to believe their own speculation. Some nodded. Some looked skeptical. Everyone looked at me. Alex and I have known each other for several years, prior to her joining the firm, Rachel continued. We've maintained a professional working relationship, and will continue to do so. If anyone has concerns about favoritism or inappropriate behavior, my door is always open. It was exactly the right thing to say. It acknowledged the incident without explaining it, set boundaries without seeming defensive. It was perfect damage control. It was also technically a lie. Because she just spent an hour in my office telling me she'd been in love with me for 4 years, and tonight we were going on a date. The meeting dispersed. People went back to work. The gossip continued, but at a lower volume. By 5 p.m., when I packed up my briefcase, the office felt almost normal again. Rachel was waiting by the elevators. Ready? She asked. I looked around. A few people were still at their desks, but no one was watching. Or if they were watching, they were being subtle about it. Where are we going? I asked. Do you remember that wine bar in the West Village? Rachel, it closed 3 years ago. Reopened as a coffee shop. I checked. She smiled. Seemed fitting. We took the elevator down in silence, standing carefully apart. In the lobby, she said goodbye to the security guard. I waved to the cleaning crew. We walked out into the September evening, into the noise and chaos of the city, and for the first time in 4 years, we walked side by side instead of with professional distance between us. The coffee shop was indeed where the wine bar had been, though it looked nothing like I remembered. Bright and modern instead of dark and intimate. We ordered, she got a latte, I got an Americano, and found a table in the corner. This is weird, I said. Very weird. We're really doing this. I think so. Unless you've changed your mind. I looked at her across the table, this woman I'd loved and lost and worked alongside for years. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? But if it doesn't, we've destroyed everything. The firm, our working relationship, our professional reputations, Alex. She reached across the table, stopped just short of touching my hand. Can I tell you something? I nodded. When I hired you, I told myself I could keep it professional. I told myself that what we'd had was in the past, that we were different people now, that I could be your boss and nothing else. She paused. I was lying to myself. From the first day you walked into my office, I knew I was lying. Then why did you hire me? Because I'm selfish. Because I wanted you in my life even if I couldn't have you the way I wanted. Because I thought something was better than nothing. She finally let her fingers touch mine, the barest contact. I was wrong. Nothing would have been easier. This has been torture. You hid it well. You did too. We sat there, fingers barely touching across the table, and I thought about all the times over the past 4 years when I'd wanted exactly this. Late nights working on cases when we'd been the only ones in the office. Celebrations after winning trials when I'd wanted to kiss her instead of just shaking her hand. Quiet moments when she'd looked at me and I'd seen something in her eyes that she'd quickly shuttered. My lease is up next month, I said. Not a non sequitur, a test. Oh? I was thinking about looking for a new place. Something bigger maybe. Closer to the office. That makes sense. She was watching me carefully. Are you thinking about staying at the firm? There it was. The real question. Because if this didn't work, if we tried and failed, one of us would have to leave. Probably me, since she was the managing partner. Probably me, since it was her firm. I love my job, I said. I love the work. I love the cases we take, the clients we represent. I love the culture you've built. But I love you more. The words came out simple and true. I've loved you since I was 25 years old and didn't know any better. I loved you when you ended things, and I loved you when you hired me, and I've loved you every day for the past 4 years while pretending I didn't. She was crying now, quiet tears tracking down her face. So what do we do? I think we try. I think we take it slow and we're careful and we establish clear professional boundaries at work. I think we tell HR and make sure everything is documented properly. I think we're prepared for it to be complicated and messy and difficult. And if it doesn't work, then I'll leave. I'll find another firm, another job. It'll hurt like hell, but I'll survive. I don't want you to have to leave. Then we make it work. I turned my hand over, laced my fingers through hers properly. We make it work because the alternative is spending the rest of our lives wondering what if. She laughed, watery and relieved. When did you get so brave? I learned from the best. I squeezed her hand. You built a firm from nothing. You took a risk on yourself when no one else would. You taught me that sometimes the scary thing is the right thing. I don't feel very brave right now. Good. Me neither. We can be terrified together. We stayed until the coffee shop closed, talking about everything and nothing. About the 7 years since we'd met, about the 3 years we'd spent apart, about the 4 years we'd spent dancing around each other at the office. About what we wanted now, what we were willing to risk, what we were afraid of. When we finally left, she walked me to my subway station. We stood on the platform like we had 7 years ago, and this time when she kissed me, it felt less like a beginning and more like a continuation. Like we'd always been heading back to this moment, we'd just taken the long way around. Tomorrow is going to be interesting, she said against my lips. Tomorrow is going to be a disaster. Probably. She smiled. Worth it though. Yeah, I agreed. Worth it. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 7 a.m., hoping to beat the rush and avoid questions. Rachel was already there, of course. She was always there first, always the last to leave. I found her in her office, staring at her computer with an expression I recognized, her preparing for battle face. HR wants to meet with us, she said without preamble. 9 a.m. Both of us. Both of us. She looked up. Apparently someone filed a complaint about yesterday. Anonymous, naturally. I sat down in the chair across from her desk, the same chair where she told me she'd been thinking about me for 4 years. What kind of complaint? Workplace harassment. Creating a hostile work environment. The usual. She sighed. They're required to investigate. This is my fault. I should have handled yesterday better. Alex, you handled it perfectly. I'm the one who called you baby in front of the entire office. I'm the one who couldn't maintain professional distance. She rubbed her eyes. I'm the managing partner. This is on me. So what do? We tell the truth. We disclose our prior relationship. We explain that we're exploring a personal relationship now and we're committed to maintaining professional boundaries. She looked at me steadily. And we accept whatever consequences come from that. They could make me transfer. Make me leave. They could make me leave too. It's my firm, but if the partners decide I've created a liability, she shrugged. We'll deal with it. The meeting with HR was exactly as uncomfortable as expected. Miriam Zhang, our Director of Human Resources, listened with professional neutrality as Rachel explained our history, our current situation, our plans to maintain boundaries. She asked careful questions about power dynamics, about whether our prior relationship had influenced any hiring or promotion decisions, about whether I felt pressured or coerced. No, I said firmly. Rachel has been nothing but professional for 4 years. If anything, she held me to higher standards than other associates. Can you prove that? Miriam asked. My billable hours are in the system. My case assignments. My performance reviews. You can compare them to any other senior associate in the firm. Miriam made notes. Asked more questions. Finally sat back in her chair. Here's the situation, she said. Relationships between supervisors and subordinates aren't forbidden, but they're complicated. We need to establish clear protocols. Alex, you'll need to move to a different reporting structure. Rachel, you can't be involved in any decisions about Alex's compensation, advancement, or case assignments. I understand, Rachel said. We'll need to disclose to the partnership. They may have opinions about whether this is acceptable or whether one or both of you should leave the firm. When will they decide? I asked. The next partnership meeting is in 2 weeks. In the meantime, you're both expected to maintain absolute professionalism in the office. No displays of affection, no special treatment, no appearance of impropriety. Miriam looked at us both. And frankly, I'd suggest you seriously consider whether this relationship is worth the potential cost to both your careers. We left her office in silence. In the hallway, I could feel people watching, curious and judgmental in equal measure. 2 weeks, Rachel said quietly. Yeah. What do you want to do? I thought about it. About the firm I'd spent 4 years building a reputation at.